So here we are.
Are we live?
We are live.
Well, welcome everybody, and welcome to the first of many recurring episodes of the SOPP Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. Um, this is an ongoing recorded and pre-recorded video format, so we can meet with schedules and stuff like that. I want to thank everybody who's came in, and I know we had some technical difficulty, and we'll get better as we go along. Uh, First, I wanted to let Betsy introduce themselves, and then we'll keep going down the list.
All right. Yes. Welcome, folks, and hope you enjoy what we're doing and stay with us as in the future. My name is Betsy Cunningham. I am an activist of a variety of things and have been since I was young. Um, and it's particularly in the area of housing and homelessness, but also in good governance. And that's kind of what promoted me or propelled me into wanting to do this kind of education and information stuff. So I'll let you introduce you.
Uh, Thank you, Betsy. I'm Kevin Bell. I wanted to do the SOPP because I think they're, especially in Douglas County in Southern Oregon, definite media desert for leftist news. I know we have a lot of really reputable news sources like KLCC, OPB, and stuff like that, but I wanted something not so mainstream where I could maybe use my emotion to say damn once in a while, something like that. I am a wildland firefighter going on 6 years now. I've been a progressive activist since I was 15, knocking on doors for Bernie Sanders for in Douglas County, which is an experience I'll have to relate and a story of its own. And My major topics really are public lands and poverty, along with homelessness and everything that goes along with that too. I think that poverty is something that is a lost terminology in today's world. I think that we've become so accustomed and used to it that it's just no longer a mainstream topic anymore. And I think that we should bring forward that we're all not living in the way we really should be living, especially in the most wealthy nation in the world. Um,
Well, and you raise something about the populism because that's the one thing that we toyed with putting in the name, but really we believe. Yeah, I'll speak for you just because of the discussion. So we believe that progressivism is really a populist movement, and so it's in that ideology. It's been hijacked by the right, but there is right wing populism, and that's what gave us Trump. But and not just Trump, but the whole, Christian nationalism and all the stuff that's really going on behind that and the control of the billionaires. So I think that this idea is that we believe our fellow residents in Douglas County, Southern Oregon, rural residents really have a vested interest in seeing that we have a more progressive society. And so we just want to bring information that really revolve around facts and information for folks to get engaged and kind of learn not only about what's going on, what's really behind it, where the powers that be are, but also how they can become engaged in actually fighting effectively against it. So our format is this live stream interactive, which is hopefully in the future we will have um, guest and audience in order to do that, but also we will be doing pre-recorded podcasts that we just upload. So you want to review the agenda or talk a little bit about what we're doing today?
of course. Our agenda today is going to be super easy and simple, this being our first video. The broad agenda for SOPP is not only to get the word out about progressive and populist agendas, but also to be a community mutual aid project where we can also help other leftist minded individuals in their projects. One segment that we're going to be talking about is going through some artists and some issues that are over in Douglas County that we're going to bring to light on our podcast. The other one is going to be talking about highlights and what you won't hear elsewhere, really. And it's divided into three segments so far, four if we have the time. I think we will, though. But I really think that what we want to cover on our podcast is what you guys want to hear. So we're also going to be attached at the end of this video and in the description how to get in contact with us and what you'd like to hear about progressive movements in your area, what you're doing, how you can be a part of it, or how people can maybe come and help you. So keep an eye on that at the end of this video. And so far, that's how we're going to be set out. Any questions or concerns, again, just please feel free to reach out to us. The
Um,
first thing
so
oh, please, Betsy.
So the other thing I think we wanted to highlight is the first thing is that this is really kind of part of what I named the Populist Media Collective. So the idea is not just what we're doing with Southern Oregon um, progressive podcast, but there's other folks involved in this. Douglas County Citizen News, which is something I created well over a decade ago, that will, be more active in discussing issues of politics in Douglas County. How citizens can become engaged. And then we're going to Frog Leg Art newsletter, which we're going to profile in a second. You're going to hear a recording from the person whose idea that was. And then Kevin, has a Substack. Is you want to give a name of your Substack?
Sure, I can do that really quick. Let me pull it up. I I'm I'm trying to use my Substack in conjunction with the SOPP. I'm just starting it out to put a lot of my written thoughts out there. So please be gentle with me. My username for Substack is just my regular name in real life. It's Kevin L Bell 123. Hopefully you can find me up there.
Well, and we will have that information and anything that we refer to that has an ability to go a link to, we'll put that later in the description later today. So everything that we cover, if you're interested in, people can access that information. So, unfortunately, Max Smoot, who is the person who kind of forced this whole thing to come just with his idea of wanting a community newsletter because he was a little bit angry about some things he was seeing at a local political level, like with happening with the city council and some stuff that was going on. But he's also primarily a local artist, and he has a art studio, Frog Legs Art Studio in downtown Roseburg on the corner of Cass and Southeast Stevens. Laning and Southeast Stevens. And so he has to work today. And so he did a podcast recording with me yesterday. And so that is what we're going to link to right now, I think.
Awesome. Well, while
Okay.
Betsy's pulling this up, I want to interject really quick. And unfortunately, Max did not have a time set when they recorded this yesterday, but he did find one this morning. So he wanted me to put this in there that May 27th at the corner of Cass and Stevens at Frog Leg Art Studio is going to be a noise concert. It's by, I have the name of the band right here that I think you all will love it. And it is Portal to the Goddamn Blood Dimension. There's a lot more that's going to be in there, and I think it could be really nice. Beauty is in the ear of the beholder, of course. So please give it a listen if you get a chance. We can't really hear it.
Not sure how to address that. Can you hear it at all? Because I can
No,
hear it.
I couldn't hear it. I think it's just coming out of your speakers and it wasn't playing back.
Ah. So what's the solution?
Put it on your phone and hold it to the microphone.
All righty.
And SOPP is a volunteer project. So if you guys would like to help us out with any video or editing needs, please reach out to us. We would really appreciate any community support we could get.
Mm.
While Betsy gets that kind of figured squared away, because honestly, I don't know the answer to that one, Betsy. I'm sorry. I'm going to go over a little bit more of the broad projective of objective of SOPP because this is a great idea in my opinion. I think the time for it is now. I think that the left has almost debilitated itself. The right has its podcast bros and its toxic masculinity that flows through it like water. So I think that it's really important for us as progressives and leftists to also start our own narratives in our own communities because frankly a lot of people especially in Douglas County that I know of since I've lived here for 23 years are afraid. They feel like a very blue dot in a very red sea. And I think it's important to realize that you're not alone out here. A lot of people are out here that really want to help you. And we really want to start the collective conversation that, you know, if we work together, maybe we can change things around here. Like, I think we've all seen how, frankly, fucked up if we delve into budgets and things like that that they can be. And those are some of the things that I'm really proud that we're going to be discussing here on this. I want to say, if you're just wondering where we draw the line, I want to say that we will cover as many topics in Douglas County, no matter how fiery they are. I think it's important to touch on subjects that are important, even if they do rile people up, because we're not, bread and butter, breakfast, brunch neo liberals. We're trying to get in and get to those nitty gritty conversations because without those nitty gritty conversations, we we don't we don't progress as a society.
Well, let me see. I'm on here. Okay. So, well, due to that technical difficulty, something apparently we have to figure out. We're gonna just upload the recorded video after this. I'll put it in the description and we'll just upload it as a podcast on our YouTube channel, for just what, you can hear it directly from Max. But I do want to say that part of the things that reminded me when I had a discussion with Max early on about the Frog Lake newsletter. And I thought it's a great thing. We don't have any alternative news. We have a very closed, gossipy society in rural, in at least this part of rural America. And the reality is, there's a lot of stuff that our mainstream newspaper, that's been around for a very long time, won't cover. There are things that they will cover that we don't think really, they allow opinions that really aren't based in fact. And then we also have a community newspaper in that's been around for a while now that is very right wing kind of MAGA stuff. So we don't see there's any real reporting going on local things that sometimes happen behind the scenes. But the other side is truly is Max's idea that triggered my what I think about the song Bread and Roses, which is an old, it was actually a poem, but ended up being a labor song for years and years. And and the theory is that when you're fighting for good wages and your rights, that yes, our fight is for bread, but we fight for roses too. So it's not just about having your basic needs met, but what a community, what arts and music and all those, kind of cultural things mean to a society. So I think that we have to not, when we talk about politics, it's not just about housing, food, medical care, transportation, living wages, all those things. It's also the ability to have a more enhanced life. That's the one thing that maybe does separate it from the rest of the mammals, on the planet, is we actually do have this massive culture, and so that can't be. It's not separate from making community change.
And a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about and cover, frankly, I look at them as the famous quote from actually, he was a Republican governor. I just can't remember his name right now. That public parks and public spaces and public activities are a gift to the future from the present. And I always liked that saying because, frankly, being a young man right now, I've always been nostalgic being raised by my grandparents, and it's always their gifts to me. So, what is it that I'm going to leave down to my grandchildren? And right now, it looks like we're cutting way too much and we're poisoning the streams, and there's not a lot that we can do. And I want to hopefully change that because I want my grandkids and my future generations to live in a place that's green, that's connected to the environment, that is socially responsible, and the community aspect that we all pay attention and we all do what is right.
And that reminds me that even such as our age difference, you're young enough to be my grandchild. Actually, I have grandchildren older than you. And the thing that about history of the past, like my parents were much older than parents normally tend to be, but the reality of the union activism, the activism, and what people have done to stand up for what is right and to try to make a better society is an integral part of our history, one that is not often told. And something that people hear me say, and probably hear other people hear me say, or you hear me say it again, is we have a middle class. We have a modern middle class, even if it's shrinking. But if it weren't for socialists and communists who organized unions in the 30s and 40s in the United States, we would have never been there. And that history has been removed from school books, or maybe, it was really never there. So the past can teach you, and people who've lived through experiences. And although my generation didn't live through the kind of mass organizing that happened in the union movement, for example, we did live through civil rights. We did live through the Vietnam War, which was mass mobilization. And so there's an important thing to listen to the past, to learn from the past, to inform what you're doing in the future. And so some of that thing, I think, is what we wanted to accomplish here, is kind of bringing that historical perspective to the movement that is growing now and that needs to grow now to fight fascism, or our march to fascism.
Well, and truthfully, the march to fascism has been slow and methodical all the way since union busting in the 70s and 60s. Truthfully, it started way before that, in my opinion. But I think that the real nuts and bolts of what we see as neo-fascism in America right now, the MAGA hats and all that, all come from the union busting and what happened in the 80s under Reagan. Frankly, that was the experiment, and now we are under the full-fledged, the worst time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you look at the Project 2025, which is what we see, the dismantling of government under Doge is happening, was in the playbook Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation, which is the one who authored and was developing that, they were consulting Ronald Reagan in the 80s. And the move of even the more progressive or liberals became a term we now call neoliberals, for that whole idea, that false, narrative that capitalists will save us all. And you've seen this march to more wealth gaps, lack of affordable housing, homelessness. So you look at even back to the 80s, there's a progression that you can see of the wealth gap happening, the reduction of that middle class, the reduction of union labor, and that was part of that, and the homelessness. I mean, I did homeless activism in the 1980s in the LA area, and believe me, it was a whole lot more solvable problem then, even though government didn't want to do that because we don't want to pay taxes. Although we're more than willing to give our money away to the billionaires, apparently. So,
Well, and it's a perfect microcosm in Douglas County, since we're focusing on Douglas County in Oregon, is how many times have I heard a school bond fail? I mean, when I was going to Eastwood Elementary in the mid 2000s, there was school bond measures still going on, and those were constantly shot down. But yet, we will defund libraries, parks, and raise the rates on garbage and services, while still buying properties that make absolute no sense. The playing like Monopoly with our tax dollars, because frankly, what I think, in my opinion, is a socialist system is not a system, one that punishes the ones that need to be punished, but one that does not motivate you through pain or something like that, but does it through incentives. Because what is the purpose of a government, in my opinion? And the purpose of a government is to always protect what its people, to spend money. I mean, why? It's not a business, it's a public entity. It's supposed to protect the people.
well, and it's supposed to, and the way when we look at it through a capitalist lens like cash, is this thing paying for itself and it's only looking at money, then you're not looking at the intrinsic benefit that that program was founded to provide, such as education, right? That it's the goal of why you have it, parks for recreation, for those of us who can't afford big lawns and our own private little park setting. This is the commons. This is, what you call the commons. These parks are where people like me can go and enjoy the outdoor in the city of Roseburg or in the county, where we can't go set that up in somebody's lawn, right? You say, oh, well, you got a big piece of property. I'll just have my barbecue here on the edge of your property. So the reality that the removing that, which we're going to talk a little bit about, in a minute. So anyway, so the benefit is, what's the end result? What are we getting for this? Are educated students? Are we getting educated society? The roads, are they taking it where we need to go? Not are they cost effective, right? Not are they making a profit, or are we getting money in? And that motivates the more right-wing idea that we should pay tolls, which is ridiculous premise. And it then says, oh, well, some of these public lands is now only available to you if you can pay for them. And that has been a long, long road to there. And there's a lot of stuff we pay for that, in my opinion, we shouldn't have to.
Well, and it's an even longer argument that, and this is my problem with the American ideal of meeting in the middle, is that sometimes when you don't fund something to its full sufficiency, you might as well not fund it, because you're going to lose people's hope in the system. Just like with the education department, or even food stamps or stuff like that, you get just barely enough to subsist on, but it's not enough to thrive on. And what people need to do is thrive, so they feel like they're in, what is it? We are in the age gap right now of me, the early 20s. If you go back in history from the 70s, 80s, 90s, my age gap has always been the happiest generation. We're just getting our own freedom. We're starting our own jobs. We're getting house, blah, blah, blah. But in the early 2000s to the 2020s right now, my age group is now the most depressed, because frankly, it's working its ass off without the appreciation. You know what I mean? Because it's not getting the help that say the best generation got when it came back from World War II, where it was getting subsidies for housing, medical, education grants, and things like that from the Pell grants were coming through. And I think that's what prospered to our great society. I don't like Johnson for the Vietnam War and the continuation of the United States military industrial complex, but I do enjoy the thought of the great society where we lift everybody up, educate them. And Lady Bird Johnson said it best: what do you want with public money? Well, you want transparency and you want good public parks. And I agree with that.
Well, and we want public housing, or what I call social housing, or what is called social housing, the right to housing. We have to recognize those things too. Which reminds me, when you say that we don't properly fund things, homelessness and housing is one big clear example. And we will be doing another show or two on specifically though that and how it impacts Douglas County. But the reality is, because we do not properly fund what needs to happen regarding getting people not just off the streets, but to stay off the streets. We've refused for all of my lifetime to adequately fund what needs to happen. And then we bitch about the fact that we call them failures. Well, yes, they're called failures. Try to cook a recipe, forget one of the main ingredients and it's going to fail,
Well,
right?
everybody equates it to a personal failure when I think it's a societal failure because frankly, I remember the story and you'll know the name of it a lot better once I start talking about it, but they followed a homeless man around in LA County for forever and they actually did the math. Instead of putting him up in a nice hotel room for the 6 months they followed him around, they followed him through in and out of jail, through processing, through mental health services, through, all these lines and lines and lines. And frankly, that we paid more instead of just doing what should have been done in the first place because we're going through so many half measures to try to make somebody happy instead of just doing the full deal right here. Here's your house, here's your food, here's your water, here's how you can live, do what you will.
And that's a good point. And I can't remember the person's name, but I definitely remember the study. And you're absolutely right, because in working as an advocate in that field, I've, used that example that, even in looking at Roseburg, we don't have a true picture of what badly managing homelessness has cost us as taxpayers. And it's a lot when our municipal court is primarily about that, when all of the police presence is about that. And it's really not creating solutions. It's just trying to pander to various groups who, think it is personal moral failure. But you're absolutely right. One of, my ongoing statements is it's not personal moral failure, it's social moral failure. It's a collective failure that we have to address. And hopefully at some point we'll be ready to do that. To move into the kind of the stories that we were going to just highlight today, one of the things that we actually have, we did a podcast and we're planning on doing a couple of just pre-recorded podcasts this week about our money and our money in county budgets. Um, the reality is government is about providing services collectively. That's ultimately what it is. So whether that service is law enforcement, whether that service is parks, whether that service is roads, it doesn't matter. That's the end game. So if you want to say that there's a goal for government, it should be providing whatever services people need in any particular arena. But so then how do they do that? They have to raise money. And so that's where the budgets come in, is that's really where the priorities of any government, whether it's the city, the city of Roseburg, it's the county, or it's one of the many special districts we have, like the Umpqua Public Transportation District. So in the next week, we hope to record a podcast regarding the city of Roseburg budget and the Umpqua Public Transportation District. All of them are in budget processes right now. There's a legal process. They have to have their budgets done by June 30th, and their fiscal years, as their financial fiscal years run from July 1st through June 30th. So they don't run concurrent with the calendar year. So this process, and it's usually a couple month process from beginning to end, but we're going to take a look at that, even the explanation about how these budgets, but people say, oh my God, boring, don't talk about that. But the reality is that's what decides all the things you might find yourself complaining about. Right? When you look at, okay, why is the pothole in the road? Why isn't the toilet open when I'm in the park? All those things have to do ultimately with money, although public opinion guides some of that.
And it
So
goes even deeper into that because It frankly, having delved into the budget with Andrew, our guest, the other day, it is a little dry, and there are some times in that video I would have wished to slow down, which we'll get better at in future videos. I promise, audience. But what I will say about that is that, that's why we lost our county library system in the early 2000s. That's why our parks are being logged to make some sort of modicum of income for the county, is because we refuse to open our eyes to what's actually happening. And I think the budget is the perfect way to get to the nuts and bolts of it. And I really hope you can watch this video that we're going to be posting soon, because it really does. Andrew is a whiz at this math stuff. I came from Glide, so I can barely count on both fingers. but we really do get to the nuts and bolts of it and see some pretty surprising things that I think you guys will enjoy.
Um, yeah, and the budget stuff, can look boring, but to illustrate what you just said regarding the library, I actually used to attend the budget committee meetings in the early 2000, mid 2000s here at the county, because I saw a pattern of every year money was being removed from the library. And I was very concerned. There were only two people during the hearing process that discussed the library. That was it, just two. Now, once they actually moved to close it, lots of people rallied around it. But if that activism had happened, in my opinion, when they were having these discussions and people were there and aware and paying attention. And all this stuff is public record and it has been for decades. So, what your government does is open to you. You have to just know how to access it and you have to be willing to do that. But unfortunately, even with something you're going to talk about later, the problem always people rally when the decision is already a fait accompli, right? When people already have decided, in their discussions, because of their politics, whatever it is, that they're going to do something, and try to unwind it then is really, really challenging. So, thanks to the city of Roseburg, with the, city of Roseburg does have a decent library, but it's still not the library that actually existed when the county fully funded the library.
I was working at the Lower Umpqua Valley Library as part of my college internship when I was going to UCC here a couple of months, maybe half a year ago now. And it's a perfect example that we lost so much because as part of my project, I was the Pacific Northwest intern focusing on things around here. And Alex had me going through the old history records because the Douglas County Library System, when it closed down, was going to trash all of our valuable records, stuff that had survived from the 63 flood. Very important article pieces highlighting the person of the year, the citizen of, all these really, really interesting and important things that are our history, because frankly, I think people have forgotten what Douglas County used to be, which is a land of mutual aid and help. We're a rural population. We know to help our neighbor out, feed our neighbor, make sure they get to school on time, make sure everybody is taken care of. Because if we don't do it as a community, a collective community, who is? And rural communities like this, a lot of times we get left out in the dust. Before we had the library system in Douglas County, we had the bookmobile, and that was rural people out coming and visiting and taking care of one another. And in communities like this, you will not see a healthcare system. You will not see dentist's office. You will have to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours away. And I think that's another big example of poverty in rural Oregonian places, because we might be in one of the most prosperous nations in the world. But frankly, it's been dawning on me, especially living in rural areas my whole life, is that we're cities surrounded by third world areas. When I was living in a trailer out in Glide at the top of Scott Mountain or Roberts Mountain, it was hard to get water there. The septic tank was busted. The leaks were happening all the time. And that was just what I could afford because I had been living out in Glide my whole life. That's where my job was. That's where I was taking care of family. And it just goes back to what is that collective mutual aid that we can hopefully talk about in the future too. And that's one of the things that we're hoping to provide here at the SOPP, just, and the collective populist media network that we're making. Because one, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'll be the first one to tell you that. But I do have a loud mouth and eyes to see what's happening. So I'll usually be one of the first ones to scream about it. And that's why I want to work with other people who are smarter than me and hopefully have some guests that will really talk about this stuff. One of the big things that I care about being a wildland firefighter for 6 years and going back 3 generations is the public lands and how the public lands and how we sell those off to timber investment trusts and all these big wigs from out east are just extracting wealth from Douglas County. In my opinion, that's why a lot of my generation have left this area is because Douglas County is not a place to build wealth. You have to be a certain select few and know the right people to start building wealth in here, but be part of their club. And that's why we're an extraction place. Rural places in Oregon are meant to take timber out of, take fish out of, and then take it somewhere else. And I think that's a really big shame that hopefully we can start changing.
Well, do you have anything else you want to add about the federal attempt at the land sale since you kind of, went down there?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm going to be focusing on the most is watching what's happening with our public lands. What started me on this particular quest is not, I hate being just a foil to Donald Trump. I hate looking at him. I hate hearing his name. But was when I moved to Reedsport, there was over 25,000 acres that were sold to a timber investment trust back east. And that was public lands from Reedsport over to Coos Bay. A lot of that was O&C lands, public lands, and stuff like that. And they just sold them right out from places I really enjoy and people very much enjoy. And so it's just that's a microcosm, in my opinion, of what's going to probably happen in the future. If they're really going to be gutting Umpqua and, the Boulder Wilderness and some of the places that we explore and really do love, well, I'm hoping to be a foil to that. The other thing that I'm really going to be focusing on is one of the reasons we're doing pre-recorded podcasts is I am a firefighter for the last 3 months, 3 months out of the year, usually from June till October. So I'm hoping to give you guys updates while I'm out there of, what's going on and what I see, especially with these federal cuts to grants and stuff like that. I'm not really worried about if I'll go out there because I'm an old-fashioned ground pounder. They always need more people like me to dig holes, but I'm more worried about the people who are going to be supporting me in making sure I come home alive. My ground information services people, the people who are feeding up after me. How many times is my blue room going to be cleaned before birds are touching my ass? So I'm hoping that I'm going to give you an updated information of what I experience out on fire season, because in and of itself, I think that fires happen primarily because of human caused activity. And that is unfortunately, again, the extraction of wealth in our community, which is timber. And so I'm hoping to maybe highlight and bring some information that I see out there into your view.
One of the things I remember you mentioning to me is about the number of people in the Forest Service or BLM, the federal, that have taken these early retirements
Oh, and
or no longer.
yes, yes. So I heard this from my crew boss. So again, this is conjecture and hearsay. So I that's why I didn't bring it up. But it's a podcast where we'll talk as ladies between these birds, bees, and sycamore trees. But he is telling me that out of the people he's known from working with the Forest Service and public entities for over 20 years, is that almost 25% of USDA employees have taken the preferred deferment program. So really what it is it's going to be a bunch of people running around without the right information, that's another big thing I worry about is where is the old school information going to come from? Who is going to tell us, their lived experiences, which is a reason why I'm really enjoying starting this podcast with Betsy is because I take my lessons hopefully a little bit early before I have to take them on the chin. So I'm hoping to not die this fire season, and hopefully you'll follow along with me as I don't die. And I'll also be, again, besides just what I see out there, I'm going to be studying along and saying, hey, yes, the 25% that did take the deferment, it was true. here's the numbers to prove it, and all these other things that I notice out here. Because frankly, if it is that many people, I don't know what's going to happen. That's a very scary question, because back for fighting fires for the last 6 years, I've always been able to call for support from my strike team leader, from division overhead, from a number of agencies and people with right experience and the right know-how. But now a lot of those people might be gone, and it might just be young men running around in the woods trying to stop fires. And that's how we lost a lot of lives in the past. And I'm hoping that's not going to happen again.
That's actually a pretty scary thought, but you're absolutely right. Making these decisions in critical areas like staffing of folks, for support for wildfire, for fire, or any kind of disaster that is happening, but particularly fires, which are ongoing, unlike a lot of other kind of natural disasters, like an earthquake happens, right? And there may be aftershocks, but you guys can be out there weeks after weeks after weeks having to control this. And if there's not enough staffing, that can actually impact it. People can die. And, I'm not even sure people think about the consequences in the federal administration about what they're doing right now, particularly in critical areas like wildfire fighting.
Well, and it'll get, hopefully, in these conversations that we have in the future over this fire season, it'll get even deeper than that, because these are a lot of people's livelihoods that are at stake. It's not even, just I'm willing to put the time and life out there, but there's certain rules and regulations when it comes to being a federal wildland firefighter, because they work way more hours than the regular person. Their day starts off at 6 a.m., probably ends at 6 p.m. if they're lucky. If they're holding a burn, it might end up at 3 a.m. They might be staying up such long time periods, and then they have a work to rest ratio. So you can only have so many people out there fighting fire before they have to go get some rest, or you're just sending people out that are sleep deprived, hungry, and tired to their deaths. Frankly, you can't make a malnourished person walk 3 miles up a Steamboat Hill and expect them to put a fire out in timely fashion.
Yeah, and it's even, total disrespect for the people like you who are willing to risk their lives, because that is what you do. You know that and lots of, emergency kind of folks do that. But firefighters, I mean, the real danger is immediate and constant sometimes, which probably doesn't really exist in any other profession we have. So I could delve into the whole shitty pay you guys get compared to what you should be getting and the safety rules. But now it's even, that sets aside, because it's really, if they're not staffed, what do you do if if you've had all your hours, you have mandatory sleep, and there's nobody to take your place? Well, we'll just have to let that part of the forest burn until some people get some sleep.
Or you're going to
I
have
don't,
to send some really tired guys out there. And I've been one of those people who've stood on Devil's Knob out in Tiller for over 24 hours straight doing a backburn with Wenatchee hot shots before. It's a very unfortunate situation, and you don't want to send too many 18-year-olds out there, because when that freight train, you hear it come rushing straight towards you, you want those more experienced people there, because a lot of people lose their nerve. I mean, my first fire season, it was a really intense experience. I was thinking I might have to bug out if I did not have my crew boss come down and start checking on everybody and say, hey, we've got the line all prepared, think about it for a second. I would have been a lot more stressed out. And I worry about the mental health of a lot of these people, because frankly, firefighting, if you're up for the job, isn't about the physical demands. It's about the emotional demands. And if you can keep it up, because it's a 2 week straight roll, then you get your 2 days off. So a lot of the people, they can do it physically. It's just, can they stay up for 18, 16 hours straight, repeatedly? Can they be digging 3 miles, 24 hours a day? Can they really do all this stuff? And I think it even goes farther than wildland firefighters. I know we've been touching a lot on wildland firefighters, but it just inspired me to think of another show, which is essential workers in Douglas County and how they're treated. Because besides wildland firefighters not getting paid enough, which That's true. Is, the education department in Douglas County, teachers don't get a lot of money, nurses don't get a lot of money, and there's been lockouts. What about the truck drivers and the Bigfoot workers union and all these other things that are really essential to making the Douglas County workers economy work, that are really underserved? My perfect example for the audience right now is the Bigfoot beverages strike. you know we might not see it as immediate, but when it first happened, store shelves were pretty sparse. And now there's people, hundreds of people at least, around Oregon that are now without jobs because there's been a union lockout. And those are essential people. Not only are they essential because they bring our beverages and what we drink to people, but also because they provide a lifeline to our economy. Those are people who go to the coffee shops, who go to Safeway, who go to Fred Meyer's and buy those things that no longer can. And it's just a bigger thing of how are the workers in Douglas County being treated? Because it's not nice. Frankly, we have the lowest minimum wage on the west side of Oregon. So it's maybe that has a lot to do with why we're also the poorest county on the west side of Oregon. But we can get onto that in another show.
Yeah, and we're not quite the poorest, but we're close. I mean, and personally, for the people at economic risk, and thanks for bringing up the Bigfoot thing, because there actually is a community support, trying to help, with at least the boycott. And so we actually probably need to do one of the pre-recorded podcasts, speaking specifically of that and how supporting unions is important. But anybody can stop by the picket line Monday through Friday from 8 to 2 and join the folks. It's out on Highway 99 at the corner of 99 and Pepsi Road, which is the Bigfoot used to be called PepsiCo and is right down the road there. And so people can do that right now, do it on your own. And I know that there's some planning to do some more assistance, more community picketing with those folks. Because union busting, no one should support union busting. No workers should support union busting, no matter what rhetoric they want to talk about. So, kind of the stuff you picked that you wanted to talk about today. The last thing on my list was parks. So maybe you can go into that, and then I'll go back. I'll go and talk about the what's the matter with Roseburg.
Okay, perfect. The last thing I really wanted to take an interest in is parks in Douglas County. And I think most specifically how they're being sold and frankly just taken advantage of. I lived out in Clyde for the majority of my life, and I could name two parks in a 20-mile radius that were logged in my lifetime being there: Whistler's Bend Park and Cabot Creek Park over behind the bridge up Little River Road. And Cabot Creek Park right now is a lot of those camping spots that me and my family enjoyed growing up are no longer accessible, just because the road the ground was so torn up, and now there's no tree coverage and just a lot of stuff like that. I would like to talk about the parks because, again, our public lands are just a gift to the future, and any way to take them apart is, I feel like, a great injustice and something that should be everybody can agree with. There's a man over from Montana who's their only congressional district member who's going to be voting no on the big beautiful bill because it strips public lands. And I think that's something we can all agree on, because where the hell are we all going to fish? How would Frank Moore, the guy who established the fly fishing corridor up the North Umpqua River up to Steamboat, feel if we were selling and frankly just raping our public lands right now? Because how are the fish going to flow down if the toxic chemicals are coming down every waterway and things like that? Our I remember a book that I like to read, and this is going back into injecting some history into this today. Is I was reading How High the Bounty by Henry Loretta Wright. She was a pioneer woman who helped establish Clyde out in forever ago. They had a cabin out on Illahee Flats. And in the last excerpt of the book, she talks about how she despises clear-cut logging, especially so close to rivers, because it's detrimental. And she could feel the heat. She used to be a packer on the North Umpqua Trail before there was even a road. And so she remembers the cool, lush springs going up Mount Scott. And now she remembers it when the road was put in after the CCC and all those people came through, and she could feel the temperature difference. And that was one of the last excerpts of her book. And so what what's happening to us and how much has it gotten worse.
And the other thing of parks, we were talking earlier about like the sale of Pass Creek Park, and the county, uses an excuse that it doesn't pay for itself. Again, the intrinsic value shouldn't be money, but the reality is, if you sell a park, you sell a public piece of property or property, it doesn't provide you any ability to deal with the budget in the future. So you may solve some of your budget shortfall right now, which Douglas County, when you hear that, you'll find out has a significant one, seriously significant one. But if you sell Pass Creek Park, no matter what amount of money you get for it, and you're probably, if you're selling it because it's a bad deal, you've already promoted that. um, that's a one-time payment, right? It's never going to make money if that's even what you want. It's going to, reduce the debt, and then that resource is gone. Period. It's lost to the public. So there's consequences, not just about let's get rid of this park that we can't afford to pay for. And I didn't see any real effort. I think a lot of people in some of these smaller parks I've noticed in the county around the years have been adopted, if you will, by people who live in the vicinity, right? And they take care of the stuff. And I didn't really see the county trying to do anything like that to address any.
No, they just wanted it sold, and that's the sad thing about it, because you're entirely right that there's a lot of other examples of just gross mismanagement from the county commissioners in Douglas County that we're definitely going to highlight. One glaring example being Pass Creek Park. There's more than enough people who are interested in taking over it or things like that. You're right. Joanne Gordon takes care of Mildred Knapp out in Canyonville and Tiller area. Her and her entire community out there, they get together every couple of months and they clean up the park. It's not an outrageous idea, but instead of doing that, it was a fait accompli. It was already sold to the highest bidder months ago, in my opinion, and it was just unfortunately breaking the news to the public.
Other than Mildred Knipe is actually out of Oregon, out of Oakland, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And but there's a part, I don't know what the name is, but you're right. I mean, that's a group of citizens in a variety of places that have gone in and just started doing it because they wanted the park to be maintained. Um, so anything else about the federal lands, parks, or wildfire you want to mention?
I'm sure that a lot more stuff will come in, because just by talking about parks, wildfires, again, my big topic is poverty, especially here locally, which is an underrepresented issue. Those are really the main three stay you'll always hear me harp on, probably, folks. So bear with me.
All right. The other thing is, because my thing is about government and helping make sure government works well. Well, the first thing you have to do is start paying attention. So I have this, what's the matter with the city of Roseburg? Now, there's a lot of things, and if you got me off on homeless and housing, I could I could do a whole show, and actually probably will at some point. But what a few months ago, I do read the agenda and see what's on there, and they had a special meeting for an executive session. So they're called a special meeting for executive session. Oftentimes, executive sessions are held like after the regular city council meeting. And it said in the notice, because they have to give some information, executive sessions that you don't have a right to attend as a citizen. They're in private and they're for limited amount of things that under state law, one of which is to discuss potential or pending litigation. So if you're going to talk with your lawyer, like a confidential conversation with your lawyer, then you want that private. I mean, any client would want that. So if you go to the lawyer, you don't want a public meeting about, you don't want your opponent knowing, right, about what you're talking about, strategy and stuff. So they do that, but any decision regarding that litigation would have to be made in a public meeting. And I saw no information that that was happening. So I decided to find, and they don't tell you what litigation it is. They don't name the people, they don't do anything like that. So I did a public records request from the city of Roseburg, and I wanted the notices, because if in certain circumstances, if you're going to file a claim like against a public entity under Oregon law in an Oregon court, you have to file what is called a court take. You have to send a demand or a tort claim notice is what they call it in legally. And it's not a form, but it could be a letter from yourself. It could be a letter and you're saying, this is what you did wrong to me. And if you don't do something about it, basically, I'm going to sue. You have to do that by law to file certain cases. And the law is good in that it protects government entities from just any kind of lawsuit being filed and having an opportunity to fix a problem before it actually becomes litigation, which becomes much more expensive for the public entity, which becomes much more expensive for the taxpayer, right? Because we are the ones who fund the public entity in one way or the other. So I got the notices, and one was from the city manager, Nikki Messinger. And this is not the first time that Nikki Messinger has attempted or threatened to sue the city. This seemed to, in reading that tort claim notice, and she had a lawyer, she's hired a lawyer to do this, is threatening to sue the city based upon some actions of some current city council members and at least one former one from last fall when they brought up in a public meeting they're concerned about her performance and they wanted to discuss terminating her contract. So it seems when folks file, attempt to hold her accountable, which is what I see, from my perspective, that she, runs for this protection and this threat. And this is not the first time, as I mentioned. She actually, a few years ago, when Ashley Hicks and folks who've been following Roseburg politics may, who Ashley is. She's no longer lives in the city of Roseburg, as I'm aware, but she was a city councilor for one term. Controversial for a variety of reasons, some of which was, her insistent, dogging of what the city manager and other things that were happening in the city are. So at some level, maybe that she, as a elected representative, that's what she should be doing. But there was a claim about some misstatements made about Ashley Hicks. Now she made them when she was a counselor, but she didn't make them on behalf of the city. And so there was a tort claim notice filed back then. And I'm not up to date on what happened between the two, but I know shortly thereafter, the city decided to actually give Nikki Messinger a protection that if they actually did fire her, they'd give her this, really kind of out of proportions termination or, package. So she would walk away with a big chunk of money. And one of the issues that Ashley Hicks had raised is that cities that the city manager was actually not living in Roseburg, which was part of the law, the ordinance, in order to be a city manager at the time, and that she was actually had a condo here, but it wasn't really her residence. But she may have done things like registered to vote there and stuff. But she also had a home elsewhere in the county and didn't sell that, to my knowledge. And so there's some issues about, in my opinion, about our particular city manager. And I have my own issues regarding how she's advised and done things regarding the homeless. But then she's jumped forward and she's, threatening the city. So again, and so we'll see what happens with that. And I'm not sure. I know there's an investigation into some issues that surround some of the council behavior, but I don't really know what that is. We should have a report sometimes, hopefully in the near future, regarding all that, because the city councilor resigned and there's some really kind of stuff that is happening that really we should, as people, particularly if you live in the city, be very concerned about regarding who's managing and what they're doing. And a lot of this is along political lines, but there seems to be a lot of this good old boys favoritism. So the mayor, is a culprit, in my opinion, because he very clearly doesn't want anybody on any boards or commissions that might have a difference of opinion of the mayor. So, he finds them hard to work with. And, and in this community, folks go behind the scenes, talk behind people's backs. And that's how policy some is made. So one of the things, and even controlling like the agenda. So one of the other controversies happening in the city of Roseburg right now is that the city councilor, the mayor doesn't have a vote. vote, but unless there's a tie in a particular motion. But they do have the ability to set the agenda, they and the city manager. Well, you see, if there's a problem with the city manager, right, how the problem is that those are the two people actually setting the agenda. And although council members, as I understand it, can submit matters to that, they don't have any real say so. So the
Yeah.
mayor can decide, or the city manager and mayor together can decide, well, this isn't important enough to talk about on the city council, so we're not even going to put it on the agenda. So a group of people who've been kind of standing up to the city councilors wanted the president. So the city council themselves elects a president who then will step in when the mayor can't be there, like to run a meeting or so.
Yeah.
So they wanted the president of the council to be able to also have an equal say in input about the agenda. So I don't know that this matter is settled yet, but I saw a big pushback of the mayor not to want that kind to relinquish that kind of control, and even some opinion, I think, that was that they really can't do that. There may be a need to change. It may, the way the city charter or ordinances are written, but it's something that probably needs to change if they're not going to do it, because we elect to vote for us, the city councils, the city council members. So for the mayor and the city manager to control what is discussed at city council meeting, and keep in mind that most things that city councilors discuss regarding city business has to be done in a public meeting. If they're going to make a decision or a discussion about it, they have to have a public meeting because we have the right to know. So this kind of all undermines the idea that they can't talk about anything among themselves if they can't get it on the agenda. And that just doesn't seem to be an appropriate thing. It's not in our best interest to do it. And even then, we jump to what the city has done to now they want to stop the distribution of needles, clean needles in the parks. And it's that is counter to what is considered best practices. And it's all part of what they call harm reduction. It's to ensure that the least harm is done when people are IV drug users. It does not enable people to be IV drug users. It might enable them to use needles over and over again. And one of the spreads of very serious diseases like hepatitis and HIV can be spread in needles if you're not using clean needles. So the whole idea, and this is accepted everywhere, in the industrialized world, that you need to reduce the harm not only to the drug addicted person, but to the general public. But instead of, finding a better way to solve other problems, like so many needles in the park. Well, one of the solutions is you find safe ground for people to be who are living outside. And you'll probably find a reduction, or at least an reduction all over of this. And you provide what is needed to ensure that needles aren't left on the ground. And there's a way to solve a problem, not try to just eliminate it, because it won't solve the problem. And that, to me, is really what's the matter with the city of Roseburg and its current leadership, is they're
Well,
not
it'll
about solving problems.
and more specifically about the needle reduction prog and that and the HIV Alliance. More specifically, having been parented by a IV drug user, they're not expensive. You can get a box of like 100 for not even $5 from Walgreens, dude. That's not going to solve the problem at all. They're still going to find them. Now you're just going to find dirty ones because they're going to be left everywhere, and there's going to be no safe, clean space to put them. And now everybody's going to be sharing them because that's going to be, unfortunately, the necessity, and that'll be encouraging all of these things.
Right. And so the whole idea, again, not just and how they spend their money. I'm going to go back to that budget thing, because every time they do something like this to police something, that they could find a better solution that didn't require the intensive need to police things. So if somebody is using a needle or has a needle, if this goes into effect, then they're going to get ticketed. They're going to go to the courts, right? So all this thing. And then if you're talking about the homeless population and folks who are out there um, living outside and using drugs, then they may not make the court date. Then there's a warrant. Then they might end up in jail, and all those are costs to the thing. So, there's a lot more than what's the matter with Roseburg, and we will just be that, and county government and stuff will be topics of ongoing conversation because we want to make this, even things that maybe happen at a federal level, policies. We really want to bring it home to how it impacts us here and then what we can do about it. And so that's kind of my spiel on both of those.
Well, and it needs to happen. And for the audience at home, if you find anything unjust in your neck of the woods, Reedsport, Canyonville, anywhere, please bring it to us and we will investigate it and see what might be happening, because there's probably injustices happening everywhere that just nobody's talking about because they're so small that they think everything's fine and hunky dory, but really it's probably stepping on your rights.
Yeah, and one of the big things that's going to impact both these local governments and small districts like the transit and your fire departments and a variety of other things that we have is the federal budget cuts. So you might be a really good time for you to start paying attention to that, including like if you live in a fire district, where are those resources going to come from and actually for them to have the equipment, even like not wildland firefighters, but even the ones that show up at your home when your house, chimney catches on fire, right? So who's going to be there? Who's going to support that system? Where's the money going to be that ultimately, even if you have volunteers, you need money for equipment, you need money for training, you need money for other things. So anyway, so when you were talking about history, we'd hope to have the presenter on to give a little spiel, but and if we're done with all this, we're going to move into New Odessa.
And this is maybe we'll probably, if Zach is up for it, maybe just do a separate podcast on it too, because I think New Odessa has a lot of merit to it. But
Yeah.
I would like to talk about the upcoming event for New Odessa too.
Yeah. So New Odessa, you talked about, the history, right, of people of progressive, populist ideology, right? The when things happen. So we look at often, and sometimes people joke about, rednecks, that's all who, is who controls. That was always as if it were always the political system, if that was, the entire history of Douglas County. But in the 1880s, the mid 1880s, there was a group of Russian immigrants who left Russia, and anarchists. They consider themselves anarchists, from what I understand, and they moved to an area near Glendale and set up their commune, New Odessa. And actually, I have not seen it, but I understand there's a monument that is in the city of Glendale now that gives credit to New Odessa as being one of the founders of what, is modern day Glendale. And so Zach is going to be doing a presentation. It's online only this Thursday, and um, it starts at 6:30 and will run until 8. And so he's going to give the history, and he's he's local born and raised, and has studied a whole lot about this interesting community of New Odessa. It piqued my interest when he started talking about it with this idea as we can learn from the history, but we also need to make sure that the true history is told and it's not all told with this, the lens of, the white male dominant, society.
Well, and it goes farther into that you know Odessa is a highlight that I would think people would enjoy looking. But that's just another example of the progressive socialist policies that have been in Douglas County for forever. Being a Glide boy, born and bred, we had the Ohio Fruit Co-op right there on French Creek. Right as you leave Glide, as you're going towards Crater Lake and stuff like that, there's French Creek on your hand side. And before it was called French Creek, it was the Ohio Fruit Cooperative or the Ohio Fruit Colony. a bunch of Ohioans got the idea to start a fruit cooperative here in Douglas County, and they sent the women and children and a lot of the big, strong laborers to build first, and then they sent the rest of the old people and the sick and the elderly in the second rundown. And what happened is, unfortunately, it didn't make it, but for a while, it was a big part of our community. And it's also, again, mentioned in that book that I might do an expose on, which is Henry Luetta Wright's One Woman's Wilderness. So I think it would be really good to talk about that, besides just because, frankly, a lot of what is Douglas County has been leftist organizing. Even farther in that, there's another book, another quotes that I have from Lone Rock Free State, because I'm very interested in the history of Glide, where they were talking about a socialist candidate in the 1800s who was making a whistle stop on the trains, and he stopped in Roseburg. And the people out at Peel Creek store were making plans a weekend ahead. Hey, I guess we'll all ride in the same wagon together out through Buckhorn, pick up so and so, and go see the socialist presidential candidate. And, because he really inspired them. And back in the day, Glide to Roseburg now is a 30-minute drive, Peel 45. But now that was a 2-hour, if not more, trip. So they were really inspired to go see that guy.
Well, I think that not only has it been part of our history, but it is part of the present, and it should be a bigger part of the future. The new Odessa, you can sign up online. It's going to be done with this interactive kind of format. You can sign up online so you could ask questions in the live audience. It will also be streamed, but it's part of this kind of civics project that Douglas County Citizen News is doing. So it will be live streamed on our YouTube channel. Again, any information such as sign up for New Odessa to be in the audience or to watch it at the live stream or later on YouTube will be available under the description of this video later today. So anything else about New Odessa?
I think people will enjoy it, and I'm hoping they have a good turnout. I've been starving myself and not researching it specifically to attend this event. I hope to see you
Yeah.
guys there.
Yeah, and I didn't want to tell too much because it's a very fascinating story. Um, so that Zach can tell better than I. Um, so what's coming up in the community? I did want to mention that there's Pride 101. Um, activists, LGBTQ plus activist Ryan Berriman is doing a presentation called Pride 101. It's going to be happening the last Thursday in May, which I believe is the
May
29th.
29th.
Yeah. And it will be at the Faith Lutheran Church at 6 p.m. And they hope to help you know about the history and significance of Pride, and what to do in even attending Pride um, events, because sometimes there is hostility associated with, folks showing up. And so that even causes problems for them finding a venue sometimes. So want to know, how people can stay safe, how they can help folks who attend, particularly vendors, as well as give a help people get a better understanding of the significance of Pride and its history. So
Which Ryan is a very talented activist who I know they've put on voting parties and other things in the past where there's a lot of activities and a lot of community get together. They are really great at this kind of stuff, and it's going to be a great time. I hope to see some people there.
yeah, I actually did a Project 2025 with them in last September, trying to warn people. And I've talked with them about doing an update of, we told you so. Now that it happens, what are we going to do about it? But that hasn't been planned yet, but it certainly needs to be. So future, and how do we get in touch with us?
Well, we've kind of been going through that through the entire thing, but to be specific to you guys and everybody at the audience at home is We have a plethora of topics that we want to touch on. And one of the future topics is going to be definitely poverty in Douglas County, race and living as a minority in Douglas County and how that's perceived, how they're actually treated. I think it's really important because I fought fire forever ago with somebody who the first thing they were told about Douglas County was it was a sundown town. And I think that it's really important to try and get that narrative out there and see how they're actually living. So race in Douglas County, poverty in Douglas County, the myth of the spotted owl, I think is very important because a lot of people still believe that the timber went away because there was the spotted owl, when really it's because we stopped we stopped the harvest severance tax. We stopped doing a lot of math that really came back to the county and helped us out. There's a lot of things that I'd like to talk about. The importance of workers in Douglas County, homelessness and housing in Douglas County, social justice. What does the socialist movement look like right now in Southern Oregon? How can we grow it? And besides the ideas that I have off the top of my head, because I'm very excited for this, so they come at me all the time, is I want to really hear from you guys. This is, again, a collaborative project where the majority of what we want to do is focus on things that matter most in our community. And sometimes I don't even know what that is. I live out in Reedsport, so sometimes I'm cut off for the rest of the county, and I could really use your guys' help and support in saying, hey, I think there's an injustice right here. Maybe it would be a great time for you to talk to us, get in touch with us, and say, I'd like to do a little expose on this issue and bring it up on your podcast. And we would be more than willing and more than helpful, and maybe doing a little bit of research and seeing what the facts and issues are and bringing it to light to everybody, because I think everybody has a personal responsibility when it comes to making sure that we are running the way we want to do, that nobody is being left behind. And again, we're in a rural community. If we don't do it, who the hell will? Because they're already cutting services in all these other public institutions. If we're not going to look out for our fellow individuals with mutual aid, we're almost going to be leaving everybody behind. And with saying that, if you have any stories and stuff like that, we'd love for you to get in touch with us. Our email is, and write this down, I'll give you a second to grab your pencils and such. 1, 2, 3 is SOP, capital SOP dot capital P for podcasts at gmail.com. And again, all the stuff and links to our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our email is going to be in the description below. So feel free to reach us out in any one of those, and we'll try and get back to you as soon as we can. We are a volunteer-led organization. Me and Betsy and a few other people are really the main drivers right now. So if you'd like to help us out, maybe help us run some stuff on the Facebook, or help us monitor stuff, or try to get the word out, or try and edit some of these videos, or be on these videos and help us. We would never turn down organization. That's what we're great at. And building this movement means being in contact with all these people. Even if you think you can't do anything, reach out, dude. We'll give you a stack of magnets or stickers to put around your entire town. No, just don't tell them you got them from us.
Well, maybe magnets. I'm gonna avoid any connection with stickers. Um, so yeah, good points. And so we do want to hear from folks. We want to, and the reason we called it podcast instead of singular is the idea that if you want to do your own podcast, and it doesn't have to be perfect like ours isn't, you need to get out there and have your voice. If you really are very interested in a topic, just do it yourself. Don't wait for somebody to do it, because it's probably not going to happen. And so it's pretty simple to do. This kind of podcast isn't expensive, and you don't have to have fancy equipment, and someday maybe we will, but if we waited till that, we might never do it. And that should be the way you look at it. So, and also the whole progressive, the populist media collective, that too, you can get involved in a newsletter, and any other ways that we are trying to get information out and keep people informed, and also help them get empowered to actually take action, know how to do that. So
Yeah,
thanks for listening.
and Betsy's completely right. Don't wait for anybody's time. If you want to change the world, run for something. Do it yourself, and I believe in you. Hopefully you enjoyed our podcast, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining in. I think
All
that went
right,
really well.
so yeah, it's done.
It's done. I like how you put, yeah, it's done. Well, I especially liked
Wait
it
a
because,
second. I have to eliminate the live stream.
oh, okay.